everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Super excited to introduce a friend of the program, Robby T, man. There's a lot to talk about today, specifically about lead conversion, about working with contacts and developing relationships. Couple things, I can't pronounce your last name, so we're going to have to just start there, Robby. Like, tell everybody a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how to pronounce that big, long last name.
Man, I don't know how to pronounce it, so we're in trouble here. No, my last name is Trefethrin, which sounds like a pharmaceutical drug with all the problems and none of the money. So I got to work for a living. But yeah, I go by Robby T because I try to be a good businessman. And again, saying it and spelling it is terrible. So that's me, man. I'm hail from Fargo, North Dakota, the frozen north.
Yes, sir.
Horizon, and that's me, man.
Yeah, we good. Robby T is what it is to us, and so we'll always go by that.
I like
Robby, you've got just an incredible story. We're not going to take too long on that, but I do want the audience to know a little bit about your background. You and I were just talking. I didn't know this about you, but you started out kind of early in your career as an ISA in politics. Like, how hard is that, right? Jumping on the phone, trying to talk politics to people on one side or the other. Kind of crushed that, right? Like, you got into business, you just absolutely crushed it on the political side.
Yeah.
And then somebody grabs you by the ears or something and says, "What are you doing? Come over here to real estate."
Yeah.
And so talk through that for just a second, because I want to go through the numbers. Guys, you're going to find out that Robby T, just an absolute rock star when it comes to setting appointments and working with leads and contacts. And obviously over here at Landvoice, we love that kind of thing. So let's just kind of go through that for a quick second, Robby.
Yeah, I love it, man. I played the one game that's less popular than sales, and that is political campaign workers. So my whole job it's called a field organizer. And I don't reveal political parties so I don't get beat up after the show. But basically my job was to go have conversations with voters, identify who they plan on voting for. And then if we think there's a chance they're going to vote for our candidate, was to get out the vote. And as you kind of alluded to, I don't think there's anything that creates more resistance than asking somebody, "Man, who do you plan on voting for?" Or "What matters to you this election?" And the funny thing is, when I first got into the political game, they always told me the opening script should be something along the lines like trying to get them to vote for our candidate. So follow some script. And I was like, I tried doing that, and then you can only have so many guns pointed at you or be called so many things where you're like, "Screw this, I'm out. That strategy is not working." And I happened to read a book around that time called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it really opened my mind to, instead of trying to sell them something, I needed to sell myself on them. Seek first, understand before you're understood. So really what I started to do was going up to people's doorsteps. I'd walk up and I'd say, "Sean, man, what are some things that you care about this election?" And sure as heck, of course, always the very first thing I would say is, "Man, I don't really care about politics. I don't really know," that sort of thing, right? And then what I would say is, "Well, if there was maybe one or two things that you think you maybe really are passionate about or you care about this year, what are those one or two things?" Yeah. And almost always the dam would break. And my conversations, or my problem, I should say, went from not having a conversation at all and people pointing guns at me to people literally giving me meals inside their living room and 15, 20-minute conversations. And I trained my volunteers to do the same thing, which was really the antithesis of what most sales people are saying to do, which is memorize the script, always do these things. And I memorized 0 scripts. I just became obsessed with trying to understand what are some things that Sean cares about. And when I did that, what ended up happening was we elected people that people said were never going to be elected. From there, as you said, I got headhunted into real estate, and I, like most, never thought I'd get into real estate. And I was at a fundraiser. Someone was like, "Man, you should come work for us." It was actually one of the people I helped elect. And I was like, "No, man, I ain't getting into real estate. Screw that. Yuck." And I had a cousin in real estate who was pretty traditional real estate. I was like, I don't want to be that. And then I was essentially, one of the bad things about political campaigns is you're basically always getting fired every 7 months or every 9 months, or you're always in this rotation. And we
Pretty high attrition, right, in politics.
It's terrible. And I was working 80 hours a week for basically nothing, no pay at all. So real estate hours without the rewards. And you can only do that so much. We were expecting our first child. And I was like, "Man, I got to get out of the politics game." got into real estate, started as an ISA, and as maybe you're kind of alluding to, over about 2.5, 3 years, I made 100,000 phone calls, spoke to 10,000 people, set 1,000 appointments that led to about 500 closings for our team. And since then, I've had the honor and privilege of coaching and training many of the top real estate teams in the country on frankly, how to convert leads, build ISA departments, all those types of things. So that's me, man. That's my backstory.
Robby, that intro, man, we could wrap up this podcast and be done right now. Like, I hope everybody just learned like 3 or 4 really important things, right? Now, at Landvoice, we talk a lot about scripting and trying to make sure you know what you to say.
Yeah.
But what we just learned from you, Robby, is, I mean, you took a job as a political ISA, so to speak, and you really learned, like, throw the script out and just learn how to communicate with people and be human and be a good human being, right?
Yes.
And be curious. And then the other thing I just learned from this whole intro was, man, it's all about the numbers. Yeah, right?
Yeah,
like
100%.
You got to make the dials to make the contacts, to have the conversations, to then convert and have listing appointments and make a lot of money in this industry. But boom, I mean, really early in your career, you learn very quickly all of those lessons in a very real way, right?
Yeah. I learned firsthand, people don't want to be sold. They want to be heard, understood, and valued. And I think the biggest sin of so many salespeople is we're not truly interested in understanding what somebody's dreaming about, what they're hoping to do, what their biggest dreams are. And if there's one thing I've become obsessed with, it's having a better understanding of what Sean wants. That's what I care about.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. People want to be heard. I don't say this in business as much, but I think truly as a human being, people want to be heard, seen, and loved.
Yeah.
Now, we're not going to really show a lot of love, but we can show empathy, right? Like, we can show that we're a human being and not some robot with some script. And this is the part I love in the communication you and I have had over the last few weeks, is just that, right? Like, how do we throw this script out and help people know that we hear them, right? And so I want to get into that a little bit today. I mean, I know you've called all kinds of data, all kinds of leads, all kinds of homeowners, buyers, sellers.
Yeah.
But something really fascinating to me is you've just got this really cool art of helping people know that you're hearing them, right?
Yeah.
Like, get into that a little bit for me.
Yeah, I think, it's an art that I've tried to codify through my coaching and training when I'm training in other people. And I think there's just some little tools, and maybe that's what I can share. So like, number one is I've learned, I don't study sales, I study psychology. Like, I'm obsessed with reading psychology books. There's actually like 15 right here. And one of the biggest things that I've learned is humans hate feeling like they're out of control. And it's why most salespeople trigger humans, is because we're afraid that the salesperson is going to sell us something that we don't want, i.e. feeling out of control. So what I always do is I'm consistently saying things I call it reinforcing their autonomy, reminding someone like, Sean, no matter what you decide to do, I'm here to support you, man. So I'll literally name that. And then when I'm setting appointments, Sean, by the way, when we sit down, if you decide to list tomorrow, great. If you decide to list in a year, great. If you decide to never list and stay in your home forever, great. And I truly mean that authentically. I can't fake that, right?
Yeah.
But I reinforce people's autonomy, because when I do that, they feel so much more safe. And I think that's probably the biggest thing I've learned, is my job is to make people feel safe. Because if somebody doesn't feel safe, they won't tell me their truth. If I don't know their truth, how the hell can I help them? So what I've really learned to do is I do everything in my power to make somebody feel safe. The second big thing beyond that I try to train people on is the power of asking, tell me more, open-ended type questions. Meaning, I almost have to play stupid sometimes. And what I realized when I play stupid, I am stupid, frankly. Meaning, when someone like Sean says, I want to get a bigger home because my family's growing, my brain, just like most people's brain, says, oh, cute, a baby's on the way. And then I respond with, oh, congratulations, when's the baby due? And I did that once, Sean. I said, oh, congratulations. And someone said, no, you don't get it. My father-in-law just passed away. My mother-in-law's moving in. That was their definition. The family was growing.
Yeah.
In other words, I was the a-hole who congratulated somebody on their father-in-law passing away. And now I get to coach and train on this. It's kind of an oxymoron. But the
Yeah.
point behind that is I've learned that I need to ask tell me more in abundance of time, because I may be mishearing someone or not understanding. So I've learned to ask myself the question, what does that actually mean? And if I don't know
Hmm.
what something actually means, I will turn their answer into a question. Here's the way I do it, by the way. Stole this from Stephen Covey as well. You rephrase
Yeah.
and reflect. You literally take what they've said to you and you say, got it, Sean. So you want to get a bigger home. It sounds like family dynamics, getting a little bit bigger. Help me understand what that means to you. I'm not sure I'm understanding. So I'll literally play dumb strategically. And almost always what happens is I get closer and closer and closer to truth. More information comes out. And family on the grow has been babies on the way, twins on the way, triplets on the way, horses on the way, dogs on the way, mother-in-law moving in, adopting drug-addicted sister's kids, like all this diaspora of things that is the human experience. And what I've just simply learned to do is I have to be open-ended to create a safe place so people can tell me it.
Yeah, there's so much there, right? Another friend of the program, we talk a lot about these huge barriers when we're calling and talking to strangers.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to kind of get across that barrier or just lower the barriers. And what you're doing just comes so naturally after 100,000 calls, right? Like validating, telling them that they're heard, and then asking the open-ended question. So important. We talk a lot about getting in rapport and staying within rapport. It's exactly what's happening with these open-ended questions, right?
Well, I want to add one more thing, Sean. I always tell people that you should keep asking, tell me more in some way, shape, or form until people literally say to you, I can't think of anything else. So I'll keep going down unless I know for certain there's nothing else. I'll go 3, 4, 5 deep into something and they're like, oh, I can't think of anything else I want in my next home, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I'll keep going deeper and deeper. And here's why. There's actually there's some science behind why tell me more is so important. Long story short, Sean, when you and I are talking, if I were to ask you a question, your brain thinks in pictures or it thinks in terms of words. And when it's thinking in terms of words, it's thinking of about 750 to 1,000 words per minute. That's just what they've seen the brain process. The problem is that, Sean, you can only communicate, even if you're one of the fastest talkers I know, at about 250 words per minute.
Interesting.
In other words,
yeah,
reason Tell Me More is so fascinating, the reason it works is humans can really only communicate about 25 to 33% of what they're thinking when they're speaking. And we're really average salespeople where they make these mistakes is they get the surface level answer and then they move on to the next thing. What brilliant salespeople do, what brilliant influencers do, is they ask to tell me more question, which gives Sean permission to bring up that 75% of the things he was thinking that he did not bring up because he simply forgot. So tell me more is so brilliant because it creates a safe place where you start bringing up the information that they've been thinking, you start pulling it out of them.
Yeah. No, that's so cool. You and I were talking a little bit about, Landvoice, we do the FISBO, we do the expired thing.
Yeah.
Let's get into expireds for just a minute. I mean, you've made tens of thousands of these calls, right?
Yeah.
You've converted a lot of them, but everybody's got their own script with things they say, but again, it's really sparking the conversation again when we're talking to someone who's already been working with a realtor.
Yep.
The last agent didn't get that thing sold. How do we spark that conversation of tell me more? Like, what are some of your keys when working with somebody like an expired homeowner?
I haven't told you this story yet, Sean, but I think you're going to appreciate it. When I first was an ISA, the very first leads I ever went and chased was I manually scrubbed our MLS for homes that had not sold in the last decade, manually scrubbed them and pulled the numbers out, spreadsheeted them, deleted the ones that relisted and sold. I.e., thank God for Landvoice is all I got to say. Right now, it's still here now. But there was no Landvoice. This was 10 years ago, y'all. So I manually did this, or at least I didn't know there was tech behind this. And what happened was I pared it down. There was about 500 homes. Not making this. It was like 450, but I'm going to round to 500. 500 homes that I could go and chase. And I started calling them. I started having conversations with them. We'll talk about my strategy in a minute. And we ended up listing and selling 45 of those 500.
Stop it. Are 45, you kidding me?
Just under 10%. That was my launching pad. And so when people were saying, like, these leads are crap, I'm sitting there saying, no, you're crap. Like, you just suck.
9% is huge, right?
it was stupid. And don't get me wrong, like that was over a year and a half of work of chasing these people, following up. But I went and backdated it, and it was just like you said, 9% of them. But my approach was so different than what most people are teaching. I come from a background where I really study psychology, and I think what's impressed upon that is my wife was a school counselor. So my approach in almost all sales was almost always to try it on my wife to see how it would go over. And if she's disgusted by it, 90% of people I'd call would be disgusted by it.
Definitely.
So what I decided was, instead of me trying to call and sell these expireds on why I'm better, what we can do differently, that sort of thing, I took this different approach, which was I was going to call Sean, and I simply wanted to turn it into a counseling session. My whole goal was to reach out to you, Sean, and find out, man, what went wrong? What happened? And turn it into a venting session. Because the thing I know about every expired is they're frustrated, they're angry, they're disappointed, they're hurt. Dreams are now broken. They're dashed. They were hoping to do something. There's been bad service or something along these lines. And I always believe in following the path of least resistance. And instead of trying to oppose their willingness to complain and vent, I was like, I'll just lean into it. I'll become the scapegoat. Bring it all on me. So actually, I would do the opposite. I'd be like, Sean, tell me more about that. I don't hear this as I would ever disparage or talk crap about other agents. I would never do that. But you bet your tail that I would encourage them to keep talking their crap about it. And I think there's two big things that I did that worked there, Sean. One is I was finding out what mattered to them, because as they're telling you all the things that went wrong, they're telling you the things they care about. So when they're saying like they never communicated with me, they're telling you without saying it, communication is really meaningful to me. So I'm writing this stuff down, right? I'm taking these mental notes, or I'm even saying like, man, that's gotta be frustrating. Is communication something you value? And they're like, oh yeah. And they're like, instead of me being the salesperson saying, hey, I'm a great communicator, somebody I follow in the industry is Sharon Shrivastava, the president of Real. And he talks about proof over promise. And so many of us say we're going to do stuff. And what he says to do consistently is just prove it, do it, show it. So instead of me saying, hey, I'm a great communicator, I did what great communicators do, which is make somebody feel heard by asking another question. It's really not any more complicated than that. So what I would do is I'd turn it into a venting session. They're going to complain. They're going to walk through all the hurt they went through. And then I'm going to transition. The next thing I'm going to go into is, man, Sean, what would you have done differently? Knowing everything you know, what would you do differently next time? And guess what they always say? Well, I definitely would have picked a different real estate agent. Well, tell me about that. What are you looking for in an agent now that you've went through this once? They tell you everything that they want. Now, where, again, agents go wrong is they start, like, out of insecurity, start saying, that's me. I can do that. No. Validate. Like, that's super great. I see why you value that. What are some other things you value? And next thing you know, they're telling you the 3 or 4 things that are must-haves. And it's weird stuff. Like sometimes, like they can't be pushy. They got to be slow, or they got to be a Lutheran. Like that's just funny, weird stuff that comes out, right?
All the randoms.
Good to know, right? This good information. And then, and only then, once I got to that point, that's when I would tie things together and finally start exploring a solution to, number 3, I skipped it, is what were you going to do when you sold this place? So now that we started with the venting session, what would you do differently? Where were you going? Like, what were you hoping to do? Now, when I've done all those 3 things, I can do number 4 and tie it together of here's a solution to your problem. Let's sit down and create a game plan and have a conversation about what we would do differently. And of course, I'm going to tie it together with the things that they value. And the funny thing is that people were extremely open-minded.
Gosh. Just a whole bunch of brilliance and genius. And you don't get that without making 100,000 calls the way you have, Robby.
Yeah, you mess up a lot is what I always say.
You do.
Again, I congratulate more people on deaths of their mother-in-law than I'd like. I once told a lead to F off accidentally. I once told a lead I love them accidentally. We could go on my highlight reel of mistakes too if we wanted someday.
Yeah, but that's the really cool thing about the podcast is we can learn from a lot of those mistakes as well, right? But if I hear you, and if you walk through those steps of what you just did, you're never really walking into a hard close. You're now just restating what you've heard
Mm-hmm.
and again, validating what they've said. And pretty quick, you've got this organic conversation on when can we sit down and kind of talk through the rest of the details on your own, right?
I have yet to meet a really great salesperson who's actually produced at a high level who actually uses the hard close. Never seen it. But the funny thing is that's what media portrays. That's what everybody thinks works, is the slick, sleazy, gross Glengarry, Glenn Ross, the Wolf of Wall Street, the old school stuff, right? Because that's fun and sexy and glamorous. The funny thing about the most productive salespeople I've ever met, every single one of them, they're so dang good at making people feel heard. Because when you do that, you learn. I think it's as simple as this. In order to win, you got to know how you can bring value to somebody, right? You need to know what value they want. But in order for you to bring value to somebody, you need to know what they value. But nobody takes the time to understand what somebody values, what they care about, what are they hoping to do. And all I've learned to do is literally spend 5% of my time on here's what we can do to bring you value. And I can only ever do that after I've spent 95% of my time understanding what is value to you, Sean. And that's the only way I can do it. And the fun thing is when you do this, people literally say, well, when can we meet? They'll start closing you. When can we sit down? Or if they don't, I will say, hey, I think the next step that probably makes sense based off of everything you've told me, Sean, to make sure you don't get stuck in this cycle and loop of working with an agent who's not going to give you the service that you desire. So I'm literally just taking their wants, right, and reflecting it back, is getting you connected with Eric on our team. And the whole point is to sit down, talk about some things we would do differently than what you did before, talk about our strategy, and really create a game plan to get you out of your home and in your next home as soon as possible. Is that something you'd find some value in? So I'll absolutely go and do that sometimes, but about half the time they bring up what comes next, what should I do next, or what do you think I should do, or what could you guys do differently? And then, of course, if it's their idea, oh my goodness, like it's the easiest game in the world.
Game over. Yeah, game over. I love it. Building on common beliefs, listening more. I hope if everybody out there is taking notes, we've got to listen more. We've got to ask more open questions. And that's where the relationship's developed, right? Because we've gone from zero to hero just by listening, building on the common beliefs, validating what they've said, and more importantly, developing a relationship that we didn't have before that phone call, right?
Facts, man. And if you do it, the fun thing, what I love about this approach is you don't have to sell your soul to win. No. You can put other people, and I believe this, I believe that I should never tell somebody what to go and do, ever. That's not my job. I will speak truth to you. I will tell you, Sean, what you're thinking is not possible. I will reflect truth. I'll say, Sean, can I be a truth teller? Don't get me wrong about that, but I'll never tell you what to do. I'll speak the truth and I'll say, here's the choices that I see. How do you want to proceed? I will always give you that autonomy. And it's always in my heart that the best salespeople, just like they embrace this approach of, I'm going to put you and your needs, wants, and desires first above my own. Me making $1 doesn't matter. And the irony is when you do that, you make way more money long-term than anybody else.
Robby T, friend of the program. Guys, Robby has not only lived what you're living, he's gone out, he's done it. You can hear it in his voice. You can hear the passion there. He now's got a great company, lead conversion designation. Tell us about that real quick, Robby.
Yeah, dude. So I the biggest problem with the coaching world is it's really exhausting to coach people. And you only have so much time in a day and energy. So I wanted to create something that was able to scale and teach my approach without me having to say the same thing in different live calls all the time. So I took what I think are the principles of everything that you've kind of heard today, and I put them inside this thing. I call it lead conversion designation. And I think it's the only product out there that will help you take a lead to an appointment, to a closing, and then into somebody who's going to give you referrals. We go from how to convert leads all the way to how do you treat your past clients. We give you structure, steps, all of it. How do you treat your past clients so they give you repeat business and referrals? And frankly, I R&D'd all this stuff from some of the greatest minds out there. Very little bit it's my original content, but I put it in one place and call it LCD. I can't recommend it enough.
Robby, the beautiful thing about LCD is you've gone out, you've done it. Now you're coaching, training, and teaching people how to do it. And not only have you didn't go do it 7, 8, 10 years ago. You're doing it now.
Yeah.
Tell the group real quick. You just called on like 50 contacts recently. Tell me how that went.
Yeah. So I was at a conference recently, and one of the people said, you need to get out of the ivory tower and walk in the weeds. Or as my kids would say, you need to touch grass. I was like, all right, I'm going to go do it. And I hopped in, I made 50 calls. I set 9 appointments. I'm waiting for a text on the 10th out of the 50-ish leads I've reached out to.
Amazing.
I've contacted, call it 29 or 30. I forget the exact amount. And the crazy thing, I don't even tell you this yet, Sean, 4 of them have already met and are moving forward.
Come on.
3 listings, 1 buy. One of the listing was a $500 listing, $500,000 listing, not $500,000 listing, and an upgrade buyer. So probably 650, 750, somewhere in that range. There's opportunity out there. And I think if there's one last thing I can't impress upon people enough is you need to treat every single lead like there's an opportunity there and keep looking for it until somebody slams that door in your face. And by doing so, you're going to see the potential in so many places you did not see before. But yeah, so I've been geeking out, been getting back into it, doing about an hour per day. That's only about 5 hours of work. I'm going to keep doing it because,
huge numbers. Hey, LCD is where it's at. This approach is really what's moving the needle, not only for you, but for all of your customers and clients. Robby, where do people go just to hear a little bit more about LCD? I know we've worked out a 50% off discount as well. Tell the group about that.
Yeah, just go to hatchcoaching.com. You're going to see it right in center on the web page. If it's not there, scroll down a tiny bit. You'll see it. It has my face as well as it'll say lead conversion designation. And yeah, we're going to give, do you want to tell them the code?
Yeah, we're going to go with LV50, right?
Yes, sir. Yep. LV50 gets you 50% off the face value. It's usually $1,000. We're going to cut it down to $500 for you guys. And check it out. This is the most cheesy, gimmicky shit that I'll ever say. It's my Robby T guarantee. You go through it and you actually go through the class. You're like, I didn't learn anything in this thing. I'll give you every dollar back plus some. You got my word. It is, I think, 9 of the best lessons that you and your whole team can go through. By the way, your whole team can go through it at one cost. I don't care. I don't regulate it. It's a no-brainer for a lot of people.
Robby, we know we're in a phenomenal industry where you can make a lot of money. The biggest thing is we got to remember it's a numbers game, and we got to get our approach down. We got to listen more. We got to validate. We got to build relationships. Your program helps do that. We're going to give you all the data at Landvoice. Let's bring those 2 worlds together and just make greatness happen every day. Sure, appreciate you. Thanks for joining. Thanks for coming on today, and we'll definitely have you on again. Appreciate all you do, Robby.
Thanks for hosting me, Sean. It was great. Appreciate it. It was a good time.
All right, guys. Thanks.